The Andy Pollin Show.
We got to go after this with everything we got. They're going to come with everything they got.
I'll start off by saying I'm bored, I'm broke, and I'm back.
The Andy Pollin Show on ESPN 630 starts right now.
So who knew that the Four Nations face-off would become such a big deal? U.S. and Canada for the championship tomorrow night. And all this carping about the NBA All-Star Game, and maybe they need to do something like that in the NBA. Will it work? Who knows? David Aldridge of The Athletic on the Rich Eisen Show yesterday says, hey, let's not cancel the NBA All-Star Game yet. There's some good parts of that. It's worth saving. He'll make his case coming up in the 10 o'clock hour. Also, David Rubenstein, the owner of the Baltimore Orioles, he spoke yesterday at spring training and said some things that you like to hear owners say. What is it going to mean for the Orioles' chances to compete for the World Series? We'll have to see, because the Dodgers are lapping the field with what they're spending on players, and Rob Manfred is sort of defending what they're doing, but also saying, I'm hearing from a lot of fans that they don't like this. Oh, really? Yeah, well, how many teams can compete in spending with what the Dodgers do? Maybe the Mets? Maybe the Yankees? Aren't too many. So we'll get to that coming up. But Tom Lovero's got a column today in the Washington Times, which is really just speculation. There is some news involved here, but who knows where this is going to go. What we do know is, thanks to basically an overtime vote in December, D.C. got control of the federal land that RFK sits on, and they're free to make a deal with the Commanders to build a new stadium. There is no deal in place yet. I'm sure negotiations are continuing, but how soon that gets done, who knows? I was surprised to learn this a couple of weeks ago, that they're not just going to be able to blow up RFK. They've already started to take it down, but it's a 22-month project. It takes almost 2 years to take down the stadium. So once they do that, then there's a period of time where they have to clear away the land. And once you put a shovel in the ground to build a new stadium, that's 3 years. It's not the year and a half that used to be FedEx Field and is now Northwest Stadium. That went up in a year and a half with Jack Kent Cooke cutting all kinds of corners and having crews work around the clock, because he wanted it to go up before he passed away, and he didn't quite make that. The stadium went up in September. He passed away in April of that year, so he did not see the completion of the stadium, and it's never been right since it opened in 1997. And just to keep it running for the next, could be 5 years, 5 more seasons, Josh Harris dumped $75 million into it. Probably may put some more money into it as well. And I guess it's also possible that it could take longer to get a deal done, and they could be there 6 or 7 more years. Who knows? But Lovero's got this today, and it's what we say is food for thought. He says, with both the House and the Senate under Republican control, Donald Trump taking over the district could be an easy vote with the swipe of a pen. Earlier this month, a bill was introduced in Congress by Republican legislators Tennessee Representative Andy Ogles and Utah State Senator Mike Lee to put full control of the city under congressional authority. It's called the Bringing Oversight to Washington and Safety to Every Resident Act, which, if you're not paying attention, spells out Mayor Bowser, or spells out Bowser, an obvious shot at Muriel Bowser. And they talk about the crime that's up and so forth. Never mind the facts that crime is actually down in the city. But what Tom writes here, it is noteworthy that Mike Lee is co-sponsoring this legislation because he had been an opponent of the transfer of the RFK site from the federal government to the district and drafted an amendment that would require the district to pay fair market value for the land if it used it for a sports team. But he agreed not to block the transfer in return for the district promising to spend the value of the land that RFK sits on for improvements to the parks in the city. And that's all part of the plan. There's going to be low-cost housing around it and so forth and so on. But now what we've seen Donald Trump do in the last month, who knows where this might go? He's blitzing through everything, as Tom says, at a tsunami pace. So you don't know, how this is all going to work out. And if he then controls the city, if in fact it's a back to where it used to be decades and decades ago, where it was under the control of the federal government. What does that mean? Now, according to DC.gov, Chief Financial Officer's website, in 1995, President Bill Clinton signed the law creating presidentiality-appointed District of Columbia Financial Control Board. The Control Board was a 5-member body established by Congress to oversee the finances of the district. The board had the power to override decisions by the mayor and the city council. Okay, so I don't remember this. Maybe you do, but here it was in the mid-'90s that if the government, federal government, didn't like something that the city did, they could override that. The board was discontinued September 30th, 2001, following 4 consecutive years of balanced budgets and clean audits, according to DC.gov. But it would be relatively easy, as Livero writes, for the Republican Congress to revive it. So what he's saying is, if the city is taken over control by the federal government, then you wonder which way Trump is going to go. Now, we did have a meeting between Muriel Bowser and Donald Trump, which he declared to be a great meeting. This was before he took office and before he started to roll through like he has been doing here. So that was almost a totally different period of time. And after she made her statement about how well things went, there was no response from Trump. So where that goes, we don't know. There's this paragraph, which I was not aware of. Maybe you were, from Livero. He says, Commanders owner Josh Harris has a relationship with Trump. He has been a financial donor and, according to the New York Times, made regular visits in 2017 to the White House to advise administration officials on infrastructure policy. So he's got a relationship with the Trump administration. Here's the 2 ways things can go here if, in fact, the federal government takes over control of the city. On one hand, Donald Trump wants to be seen as a hero. He's got an obsession with the NFL. And in some ways, he could be, seen as the guy who delivered RFK, or the new RFK, to Washington, D.C. and take his bows for that. On the other hand, he's very vindictive, as we know. And the NFL rejected him. He wanted to buy the Buffalo Bills. He was unable to do that. It went to the Bakula family. He tried to force a merger of the USFL and the NFL in 1985 and was blown away by the court decision, which ruled that the NFL was guilty of antitrust, but the USFL got only $3 and had to fold the league. So you never know which way he's going to go. He's unpredictable. But if, in fact, this happens, what does that mean for the future of the stadium? And that's going to be something to keep an eye on, that there could be control by the federal government of D.C. and what that might mean for the future of the stadium. So just keep an eye on that. As for the hockey tomorrow night, Tony and Mike looking at it last night on PTI, which is their first day back. They've been off Monday for the holiday, and looking at tomorrow night's game, this is their take on where things stand with an event that, and I was with them, felt like, okay, let's see how this works out. It's turned out to be a very good thing for hockey and a pretty big deal across the sports landscape.
Wilbon, what sort of a moment is this for hockey?
It's a kind of a cool thing in that it's a new moment. I mean, so many things in sports are great when they are of tradition. And there's a connection, and it goes back years, if not decades, half centuries, stuff in baseball. This isn't that. This is just fresh out of nowhere.
Yeah.
And it's very cool in that way. I guess it can still be organic even though it's new. I don't want to see any punches. If anybody throws a punch on either team, anybody named Kachuk wants to throw a punch, you're out. You're done. It's like the Olympics. Get out. The hockey, the competition, the skill level is great enough. The fervor, the hitting, there was so much of legitimate, clean hitting in the rest of that game after the fighting. If there's fighting, you're done. But the rest of it, goodness, out of nowhere.
I don't want to get carried away here.
Yeah.
Because this is an invention to prop up a sagging All-Star game. This is an exhibition. And we don't know if they're ever going to have it again. But I watched Saturday night, and I am sure of what I'm going to say now. You and I, we undersold it. Because we sat here on Friday, and both of us said, it doesn't feel like it's going to come up to the level of a Game 7, any Game 7. Yeah. It surpassed every Game 7 except a Stanley Cup final Game 7. In terms of hitting, in terms of passion, when I watched this game and I saw the intense passion that every player out there was using, okay, and drawing from himself. When I saw the Kachucks deliberately get in those fights before they even dropped the puck to open the game. When I saw McDavid get the first goal and then get plastered every time he touched the puck and cleanly, I understood this was special. And so I believe that this game on Thursday night is special.
Already a sequel.
To me, it doesn't get any better than the United States and Canada, first in Montreal and then in Boston. This is all you could want.
Yeah, no.
Right?
Yes, it is. And by the way, if the sequel matches or even approaches what we saw Thursday night, then you have to have it again. You have to have it again now. You can't go back to shirts and skins in an all-star game. Nobody wants to see that.
No, they want to see this.
Okay.
They want to see you wearing a jersey from your country. It's a big deal.
I can't. You bought in like
I did.
I'm a little more skeptical than you.
I was wrong.
Just because I think that things have to bake for a while. They do. I mean, suppose the sequel doesn't live up, and then you go, all right, it was once.
Okay.
I'm not. By the way, I'm not betting against it. I'm just saying, show me.
I will grant that point, but I'm saying this has been so good that you have to maneuver the schedule. I understand there are Olympics. I understand there are World Cups. I understand all of these things. You have to find room for this because your All-Star game, like other All-Star games, stunk, and this is better.
McAvoy's out Thursday night. One, that could change the tenor of the game, given the level of defenseman he is. I mean, you get a 5-1 stinker, clunker, maybe you don't feel that way. And by the way, what happens going forward if he's out for weeks and weeks is
this was the scary thing. This is why players don't really want to have true competition in All-Star games.
Yeah, and here's something else I would add to this. If you look at what the other sports are doing, tapping the international market, with the NFL. By the way, NFL announcing today that the Chargers will be one of the teams that plays in that opening Friday night game of the season. The Eagles and the Packers played in it last year. It's the first Friday night right after the Thursday night opener, and that's going to be in Brazil. And the Commanders played the Chargers this year. And given the excitement over Jaden Daniels, it would not be a shocker if that's where the Commanders open up the season in Brazil in early September. So keep an eye on the schedule. Now, I guess we don't get that until close to when the schedule release comes, and it's now in May. So it may be a little while. They want to wait till after the draft and free agency and stuff like that before they announce the schedule. But I would think that's a strong possibility for them to open the season there. But the bigger point is, look at what's happening. Baseball, they're opening the season. I don't even know where it is. It's March 18th, but it's not in this country. What football is doing and continues to do with international games. The NBA is going as much international as they can, and what the heck, half the league almost, the players are international. So hockey should jump on this too. It makes total sense, and however they can work this into the schedule, I think you're going to see it happen. Maybe the nations rotate. Maybe once the war in Ukraine ends, Russia gets involved in this. Who knows? But I think they're right. This has been an unexpected, exciting event, and if it lives up to the hype tomorrow night, it's here to stay. I think for quite a while. This is another cool hockey story. In case you're not aware of this, I was not aware of this until this morning. That the Capitals are going to put a plaque on the fountain in Georgetown in the harbor. When the Caps came home with the Stanley Cup in 2018 from Vegas and partied all week long with that. Forget about the 3 parades for the Redskins winning Super Bowls. And they were great. And not all of them were parades, as a matter of fact. I think a couple of them were rallies. And then the first one was a parade, but it was pouring cats and dogs, and they had to ride in buses, enclosed buses, as like 500,000 people stood in the rain in the streets to honor the team. But this was the greatest championship celebration we've ever had in this town. It was a great parade for the Nats when they won the World Series, but what Alex Ovechkin and his teammates did in parading the cup around town and having everybody celebrate with it. They announced their locations on Instagram and Twitter, and people came and partied with them. It was just a wonderful week after they won. But if you remember, Ovechkin took the cup and swam with it in the fountain. So on Friday, the Capitals are going to put up a plaque commemorating that Stanley Cup swim from 2018, and it will now be permanently recognized. I know that fountain. I ride my bike down there all the time in the warmer months, and it's a great place to take a break and look out at the boats on the Potomac and the Kennedy Center from there. It's a great spot in Georgetown, and so that's where they're going to do this on Friday. And as part of the celebration, the Capitals will host a DJ. They'll have giveaways and other activities. Fans who wear Capitals gear can also receive a discount on skate rentals at the nearby Washington Harbor ice rink. So well done, Capitals. And as time goes on, those kind of things get forgotten. And it's great that there will be a plaque there so that those of us who can remember can say, hey, this is where Ovechkin swam with the cup. Wasn't that great? Wasn't that a great week in Washington when that happened in 2018? They also had a parade, by the way, and the parade was great. But what Ovechkin did with the cup and giving it to everybody to celebrate with was absolutely incredible. All right, coming up, Adam Schefter with a bunch of NFL stuff, including the Cincinnati Bengals, who would like to hang on to 3 of their stars. Will they be able to do that as free agency opens up? We'll see. It's the Andy Pollin Show, ESPN 630.
The Andy Pollin Show on ESPN 630, the sports capital.
Orioles owner David Rubenstein continues to push for a salary cap in baseball. They got 2 years left on the collective bargaining agreement. Getting some pushback from the Players Association, but there may be reason to believe that a salary cap could happen next time around when the CBA comes up in 2026. We'll get to Rubenstein's comments in about an hour from now. Football, obviously, on the front burner all the time, even when we're in the midst of basketball and hockey season. We got the Combine coming up in a couple of weeks, and the period of time opened up for franchise tagging players and signing your own free agents, which actually happened yesterday in Carolina. Andy Dalton, who played pretty well last year when they benched Bryce Young, then Dalton got hurt in a car accident, not on the field, but a car accident. And Bryce Young stepped back in and played well and seems to be now on track to be their quarterback for a while. But Dalton is coming back on a 2-year deal. And the reason I find this to be significant is this might be an indication of what could happen with Marcus Mariota. Now, Bryce Young is not on as steady ground as Jaden Daniels is at this point, but they've invested heavily in him. He's number one pick of the draft, and he's got 2 years left on a guaranteed contract for that. So they want to make sure that they tap that as much as they can to find out if in fact he can be that guy for him. But does Mariota come back because of the relationship he had with Jaden Daniels and how well he played when Daniels was out? That's going to be something to watch. And with cap room, they're going to obviously spend more than they did last year because they're now close. I mean, this is the time to go for it. But do you give him a contract that's similar to what he got last year, which I believe is about $10 million, a fairly high amount of money for a backup quarterback? But they could do what they did with Dalton. They make it 2 years. Second year isn't guaranteed. They plow some of the money forward. A lot of things that they can do with that. So that'll be something to keep an eye on. Meantime, you got the Cincinnati Bengals, and they're in a go-for-it-now period. They got Joe Burrow. Joe Burrow in his prime. You don't know how many more prime years you're going to get out of Joe Burrow. He's going into, his 6th year coming up? How about that? Going into his 6th season. Time flies. He was the player taken right before Chase Young by the Commanders, and he proved to be worthy of going that high. He's already taken the Bengals to a Super Bowl, and if they had managed to get into the playoffs after a terrible start this year, they might have been dangerous. They're that good. But they've got stars, and Burrow has made it clear, hey, restructure my contract, do what you have to do, but I want these guys on my team. He wants his 2 top receivers, Jamar Chase and T. Higgins, and they also have an outstanding defensive end who's not on the radar in the way that some of the top guys, the Bosas are, Watt, all the top top pass rushers, Micah Parsons. This is Trey Hendrickson, who's had a total of 35 sacks over the last 2 years. They'd like to keep him as well. Can they keep all three? Adam Schefter joining our morning show on Sportsmanlike yesterday to discuss.
Yeah, I mean, I think they could intend to keep all those guys. I just don't view it as very practical. I don't know how you pay Joe Burrow in the 50s and Jamar Chase 40, and T. Higgins is going to play on a franchise tag for a second straight year and be willing to forego. He might. I don't know. Like, he was willing to be very malleable last year. So maybe he does that again, and they can get T for 26 on the second franchise tag, and then Trey Hendrickson takes a modest raise, and Jermaine Pratt doesn't. Like, there's a lot of guys to pay. You can't. I know that they have some decent cap space going in. I just think it's probably hard to do all of those things. If they can, more power to them. That'd be impressive. I just think it's challenging to do.
And, Shefty, we've been sitting here trying to figure out the order of operations with the Cincinnati Bengals. We're anticipating that if they can't strike a deal with T. Higgins, they'll apply the franchise tag before the deadline, which I think is March 4th. But from your purview, who's the likeliest to get a long-term deal done first with Cincinnati? Is it Trey Hendrickson, Jamar Chase, or T. Higgins?
Well, T's the guy that there's an actual date on right now that they have to work within, because he's scheduled to become a free agent. They'll tag him if they can't get a deal done. So those are the rules by which they're playing with T. Higgins. Like Jamar Chase, they could re-sign anytime. Now, I'm sure Jamar Chase is going to want to get that done sooner rather than later, but it's not like he's becoming a free agent next month. It's not like Trey Hendrickson is becoming a free agent. So to me, T. Higgins is the priority right now. Now, they're all priorities. You want to do what you can to try to get something done with all of them. Again, I just don't know that you can. But I would assume that T is the first area that they will attack. And depending on how that goes, they can go on from there.
Adam, there's been a lot of speculation about Matt Stafford's future with the LA Rams, and obviously that was enhanced by some of the comments that his wife has made publicly about the situation that she certainly knows intimately. Is that just smoke, or do you think that there's actually a little bit of fire here and that Stafford could potentially be on the move?
Well, I think what the situation is that Matthew Stafford and the Rams have been discussing a new deal or a rework deal, restructured deal. He's got no guaranteed money left this year. And obviously, it's not practical for a quarterback of his stature and accomplishments to head into a year where there's no guaranteed money left on a deal. So they're sitting down to do that. And I think Matthew Stafford wants to be there in L.A., and I think the Rams want him in L.A. And just because two sides want something doesn't mean it works out always. So if it doesn't work out and if they can't get a contract done, then that would open the door to a potential trade if those things can't happen. But I think first you have to start with the notion that both sides are working to make it happen. And if they could do it, then all the talk, speculation, comments from Kelly, Stafford, whatever it may be, it all goes out the window as just talk because he's staying in LA with a new deal, which both sides would like to get done. But again, just because both sides want to get it done doesn't mean it gets done. But that has been the way that both sides have been approaching this, and we'll see whether or not they can get something figured out. Like the Combine is next week. Free agency starts essentially March 10th, Monday, March 10th, I believe it is. So, you're looking, at something getting done here in the next couple of weeks, one way or another, figuring it out. Okay, are we going to be together? Can we make this work? Yes, great. We can't figure this out. We've exhausted all possibilities. Not happening. You're more valuable with another team than someone else. Some teams willing to give us compensation to make it worth our while. Like, I'm not saying a trade can't happen. It can. But there's a lot of steps that they have to get to before you get to that trade.
Adam, do you have a sense of what that Stafford deal may look like?
Well, for the Rams, it would be as team-friendly as possible. And for Matthew Stafford, it would be more in the line of what he believes he's due. I forget what he's do this year. I think the number's 35 off the top of my head. I don't know why that number stands out to me.
49.6 cap hit for him.
Wait, what's the cap hit, Evan?
49.6 would be the cap hit this year.
But what's due to him?
I'd have to look that up.
In paragraph 5, base salary. I mean, I could look it up too.
Oh, no. So base is 23, signing is 12. So you're right. Why would I go with me over you? What kind of stupid remark was that by me? I apologize.
Okay, so the base is 23 and the bonus is 12, and that's 35. There you go. So my memory didn't fail me. I'm not losing my mind. So 35, what does a new deal look like? The top quarterbacks are making in their 50s. Dak Prescott's making 60. Now, can Matthew Stafford say, I want $50 million? I think he could. Do the Rams want to pay him 50 or 35? I don't think they do. So where are we coming in? Where's it going to come in if they can get it figured out?
And I think also part of it, we're talking with Adam Schefter, of course, is who's out there. Like the Sam Darnold stuff is so interesting because of his success with Kevin O'Connell, who obviously used to be with the Rams, and the connection there, if that trade were ever to happen. Adam, is there any reason at this moment to talk about Trevor Lawrence's future anywhere but Jacksonville?
No. And there never was any reason to talk about his future anywhere other than Jacksonville. He's got a no-trade clause in his contract. They don't even have a GM to make the trade. They're not interested in moving on. Scott Kahn, the owner, has zero interest in trading Trevor Lawrence. To the best of my knowledge, I don't believe the Steelers ever called there about him. They have not shown any interest in him. I don't know where that started. Obviously, somebody was told something, but from everybody I've spoken to, I can gather zero evidence that a trade of Trevor Lawrence was in the cards, going to be in the cards, something that could happen this offseason. Jacksonville hired Liam Cohen to turn Trevor Lawrence into the superstar that they believe he can be. Not trading that guy and moving on from him in this quarterback market. That doesn't make any sense, does it?
No. And look, the reason that Liam Cohen got the job is because he resuscitated Baker Mayfield in Tampa. He's the fixer. That's why you do that. So you don't bring in the fixer for the quarterback and then get rid of the quarterback. That's like, the O. Henry story, Gift of the Magi. Remember reading that in school? That the woman cut her hair and sold it so she could buy her husband a chain for his pocket watch, and he sold the watch so he could buy her combs for her hair. That just doesn't make any sense whatsoever. So that's not going to happen. And just because the Steelers don't have a quarterback right now, a signed quarterback, doesn't mean he's a fit, nor does it mean that Aaron Rodgers is a fit there either. That's just everybody playing matchmaker at this point of the year. And it's also indicative of the cycle of news that we're in right now. That, okay, yeah, there's some interest in the hockey game tomorrow night in Boston, U.S. and Canada, the rematch. People are talking about that. We're still kvetching about the All-Star game, but there's no NBA until coming, I guess it's tomorrow night is the next game after the break. And, college basketball hasn't hit the point of the year that everybody cares about, which is March Madness. So this is what we do. We speculate. But I think Trevor Lawrence to the Steelers has never made any sense from the jump. But there's more NFL to get to, and that the Chicago Bears made a coaching change as they brought in Ben Johnson, offensive coordinator with the Detroit Lions. And it is seen in some ways as someone who can rescue Caleb Williams. I think Caleb Williams suffered from Jaden Daniels syndrome, if you want to call it that. If you look at his numbers, he didn't have that bad of a year. And by the time the Bears came here in late October, it was looking like it might be a toss-up as to who would be the best rookie quarterback in the NFL. Now, what happened at the end of that game changed the fortunes of both teams, as Washington won on the Hail Mary, and they went off to play in the NFC Championship game, and the Bears several weeks later fired their offensive coordinator and then fired the head coach. But if you look at the numbers that Caleb Williams put up, they were not that bad last year. So to paint him as a bust after 1 year is totally unfair. And Jordan Palmer, who makes his living coaching quarterbacks, former quarterback in the NFL himself, briefly, brother of Carson Palmer, was on the Rich Eisen show yesterday looking at this pairing of Ben Johnson and Caleb Williams and saying basically, hey, watch out, NFL.
Caleb's going to be a superstar. I think this is the first, if you want to, however you want to chalk up his rookie year on his standard, I met him as a sophomore in high school. He's kind of been unbelievable every year, right? Then this is the first failure year. Right now, you look at the stats, and I don't think it was nearly as bad as everybody thought. Right, but this was the first year that it didn't go awesome for him, really, since he was a kid. And sometimes when guys have a bad rookie year, high picks, I worry about them. So most of these guys have been around lead 11. Some have been around these guys since they were young. When Trevor Lawrence had a bad rookie year, never for a second did I think that was going to affect his confidence moving forward. When Bryce Young got benched, I did not predict him coming back and roaring back in the second half. But I said, I don't think this is going to affect anything big picture for him, confidence-wise. I'd say the exact same thing about Caleb Williams. I think he's going to be hungrier, driven. That dude, he's done some fashion stuff, and he's had painted nails. He's had things that we've talked about outside of football. But that dude works like anybody. That guy works as hard as anybody. I think Caleb and Ben Johnson and Ben coming in and taking, here's what's worked for Jared Goff, but now think about it, it worked for Jared Goff and some great pieces in that Detroit huddle, but now he's got a guy with essentially top-tier mobility. That's going to really change that. We haven't seen a Ben Johnson offense with a quarterback that's mobile, but we've only seen Ben Johnson offenses that are like top 5 every year. So I am going to be fascinated and to study what Ben Johnson's going to do. And he said in the press conference, he's like, I am not taking the Lions playbook and plugging it in here. We're going to look at what we got and build around it. And I've got buddies there that all rave about how creative he is, how open-minded he is. It is a big step going and being the head guy. And from a play caller, that is a big step that I'm interested to see. But in terms of the marriage between those two, I'm going to be fascinated to watch how good the Chicago Bears can get and how quickly.
Yeah, it's going to be fun to see Caleb Williams, and I do think he can still be a star quarterback in this league. The other thing that's happened recently with the Bears is that Virginia McCaskey died at the age of 102. And I have a cousin who's been a 40-year season ticket holder for the Bears, and we've talked about this several times. He said it's been run like a mom-and-pop business, and they don't spend money the way that other teams do. Now, I don't know whether this is going to lead to a sale of the team, and if it does, I think you're talking in the neighborhood of maybe $10 billion for the Bears, a jewel franchise like that in a market that size, and the name recognition that they have all over the world. That could be something interesting, and when that happens, if and when that happens, what does that mean for how the franchise is run? Will they spend a lot more money? Like when Dan Quinn went in for his interview there a couple of years ago, they flew him in coach. That may not seem like a big deal, but this is the NFL, and they're known for being a kind of a cheap organization. So they've spent the money. It wasn't going to be cheap to bring in a coach like Ben Johnson. He was apparently one of the top choices, if not the top choice here last year, where he kind of blew him off. And so if they're going to spend on coaching, if they're going to do what it takes to bring in the kind of support staff around the team, if they spend money in free agency, things that they have not been really doing to a large extent because of the way the organization has been run, then it's going to be very interesting. And if you look at the quarterback class, couple things have happened in the way that quarterbacks come into the NFL now. One, they stay longer in college. Caleb Williams stayed 3 years. He stayed the minimum amount of time. That's the way it's been forever. So he couldn't have come out any earlier. But he's been on the radar as a quarterback of the future since he was a freshman in high school at Gonzaga. So people have been talking about him for 7 or 8 years now. We saw what happened with Jaden Daniels, 5 years of college football, what that meant to him and how ready he was. Bo Nix, same thing. People wondered, can they really do this in Denver with Bo Nix? Yes, they can. And even if J.J. McCarthy would have played this year, we don't know. He was out all year with a knee injury. He might have been good too. So, and the other thing that's happened too with college football and pro football is that the systems that they run in the pros are much more similar to college than they ever have been before. Like, for example, when Heath Schuler came to Washington 30 years ago, he supposedly had 75 plays in the entire Tennessee playbook. Well, a Norv Turner offensive playbook for each week had twice as many plays, and he wasn't ready for the mental part of the game, and the physical part of the game. He might have been able to master that, but he just wasn't ready to make that move and didn't make it successfully. And there were many other quarterbacks in that era who didn't as well. The 90s is paved with quarterback busts, guys who were taking Achilles Smith, Tim Couch, you name it. These guys came up. Now we're seeing guys who are NFL ready when they come out of college. We saw that more than ever this past year. And I think that Caleb Williams will be one that we'll be looking at for a long, long time in that same class with Jaden Daniels. It's much, did they make the right decision taking Daniels over Williams? 100%. But that doesn't mean that Caleb Williams can't be a great quarterback in this league. And I think that Jordan Palmer's spot on there. Coming up, David Aldridge on the NBA All-Star Game. Is it worth salvaging? And David Rubenstein, Orioles owner, with comments at spring training about the organization and spending money and where they might be this season, maybe in the World Series. It's the Andy Pollard Show, ESPN 630. To spend or not to spend? That is the question in baseball. Dodgers have answered that. They're spending like crazy. The Orioles are spending more, but are they spending enough? David Rubenstein, the owner of that team, will talk about that. Coming up shortly, the NBA All-Star Game. Is it salvageable? Yes, says David Aldridge of The Athletic. He was on the Rich Eisen show yesterday. We'll get to his comments. And it was 55 years ago today that Denny McLain was suspended for racketeering. And how come that's not a bigger deal in the annals of baseball with all the Pete Rose hubbub? We'll look back on that coming up later this hour. Denny McLain, I believe, is over 80 years old now. I think so. And, man, has he had a crazy life. All the things that he's been involved in. He's been in jail a couple of times, once for racketeering and once for stealing pension funds. And he still makes appearances at card shows and so forth. I mean, there's so many wild Denny McLain stories, which I will get to, trust me, later this hour. Meantime, the NBA All-Star Game is something that we're still kvetching about. It's kind of an annual rite now that, last year was a complete disaster with the two teams combining for over 300 points, and the winning team had over 200. I mean, it was just a joke. So they came up with this tournament this year, and there's a lot of criticism of that as well. And from what I saw, I didn't watch much of it, but it looked like they didn't really take it all that seriously. And so the question is, what do they do next? Do they try to bring that back next year? Do we go to, and this is what I've heard Wilbon push for this for years, and maybe they'll do it, U.S. players against international players. It seems to be working out very nicely for hockey with the U.S. and Canada rematching tomorrow night in the four-nation face-off in Boston. People are very excited about that. Could it work for an NBA All-Star Game? You got to try it because everything else they're doing is just getting ripped. One of those who is not critical, though, of the NBA All-Star Game is David Aldridge, who has covered the NBA for many years, going back to the days when he was with the Washington Post, and then he did it for quite a few years with ESPN. He was with Turner for a long, long time, and now he covers the NBA and other things. He's the DC editor for The Athletic, and he was on the Rich Eisen show yesterday discussing the NBA All-Star Game and whether it's worthwhile to save it, because we've had Kevin Durant say people have more fun ripping the All-Star Game than actually watching the All-Star Game, which is true. But Aldridge sees it a different way.
You can't say it doesn't matter. You are showcasing the absolute best players you have in your league, whether it's baseball or basketball or football or the NHL. The idea of an all-star game is these are the best players we have at this current time. We'd like you to watch them and see how great they are. So, yeah, it matters. Of course it matters. And so the amount of effort, right, is part of how that is viewed and how that is reflected. So I thought they did marginally better this year than they did last year. I mean, the game in Indianapolis was a monstrosity and embarrassment to the league. And correctly, they realized that they can't do that again. So they tried something different. I'm not going to say it was a resounding success and they should do this every year, but it was the fact that you had Wemby and Stephon Castle and some young guys with a little energy in it, and the old guys saying, we're not going to let these young guys punk us on the national stage. They played a little harder. So everybody played a little harder. That's all we're asking, I think, Rich. Like, nobody's expecting, full court press. I'm picking you up 94 feet. That's not going to happen. But just play a little harder, give a little more effort. And they did. So, did they fix it? No, but it was a little better than it was last year.
Well, and again, in the conversation we're having here, and I think maybe our colleagues across sports conversation may be having today, is through the prism of what the NHL just is doing.
Yeah, right? No, that's great.
And that there is a sense that it matters to these guys. Now, obviously, we don't want NBA players to hit one another in the same way we just saw in the Four Nations, right, between U.S. and Canada, but a competition, something competitive. Do you think we'll ever see that again, in an all-star weekend, David?
Well, look, I think U.S. versus the world is pretty much the last card they have to play, right? Like, they've tried every other kind of permutation of picking the all-star teams. That seems to me to be the play. It seems to me what they were, even though we're supposed to believe that the 4 TNT people or the 3 TNT people actually pick the teams. I'm a little skeptical about that. I think it was more, let's get the old guys on one team. Let's get the international guys on one team. Let's get the young guys on one team and see what happens. And as a result, I think the competition was a little bit better, as I said. But the kind of logical way to take this out going forward is to have a U.S. versus the world kind of setup. Now, there are inherent problems with that, potentially. And I think Damian Lillard pointed this out. There's way more. I know that there's a lot of international star players in the NBA. No, there are, but there's still more U.S.-born players who are star-level players than there are international. And so if you are basing contracts or bonuses on all-star appearances, well, you're making it a lot harder for more U.S. players to make all-star teams if you only have one team of 12 NBA players on it in a given year than for international players that just have more space. There's just fewer of them than there are U.S.-born players. So that's something you got to kind of work out and work through.
So expand the rosters, David, right? I mean,
that's what I've only been saying for the last 30 years.
I mean, seriously, like
an easy fix.
Off of whose nose does this skin come? You know what I mean? Like it's what are we, certainly since listen, man, the last thing I want to be sitting here in this chair is talking about LeBron deciding too late and cost someone else a spot that he needs to stay healthy for the second half of the season, which we all knew, he needs to do and can understand that that's what he wants to do. And I don't want to be talking about, Wemby and Chris Paul getting disqualified in a silly competition, right? Or the fact that, a G leaguer is the only guy who's willing to stand up and show everybody that he can defy gravity. You know what I mean? Like, this is not the conversation we should be having off of this.
No, and I was glad to see John Morant say, maybe I'll dunk next year.
That's great.
I think the league needs this. They need somebody to do it. Like LeBron's not going to do it. We understand that time has passed, but some of these young guys have to step up and say, I'll do it. I'll try it. What the hell? I've got nothing to lose. I mean, what does Anthony Edwards have to lose? Like, you know what I mean? Like, seriously, what does he have to lose? Like, he's a great player. He's going to get a max. He's already on a rookie extension. Like, he's one of the best players in the league. Like, nobody's going to think less of him if he finishes second in a dunk contest. You know what I mean? No. So you like to think that Ja and Ant and some of the young guys that are coming up, maybe SGA one year, says, I'll do it. What the hell? Let's have some fun. Because it's about having some fun. And the thing that I think resonates with Mac McClung among most people, I think most right-thinking people, is the fact that he's a young guy that's willing to try some different stuff and have some fun with it, and jump over a car. You know, like that's kind of cool. Come on, it's cool. You know, and you'd like to see, like I remember when Gerald Green blew out the cupcake on the rim or on the backboard? That was fun. Yep. You know, that's fun stuff. Let's get some fun back into this thing.
Yeah, and then you're going to see the player who wins the dunk contest or at least captures the fancy in attempting to win it, playing an actual NBA game afterwards. That's helpful. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
like,
absolutely.
That's helpful. And you know, and if some of the stars are needing to protect their brand by not being in the dunk contest, all I would do is say, of all the accomplishments Michael Jordan has, you and I could fill up the rest of my show over the next hour and a half talking about him, David. But the Jumpman logo is of Jordan winning the dunk contest. Like, you have no idea what brand building opportunities can come up from you saying you believe you can fly. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, that's the way I would go here on this front.
Absolutely. I agree. And hopefully, you know, we're seeing some momentum toward that with some, and again, I think it has to be the younger players in the league. I get that people don't necessarily want to see the old guys dunk. Although if LeBron did it, of course it would be, you know, the ratings would be insane, but he's not going to do it at this point. But yeah, I mean, it was great to see Castle dunking. I hope he does it again next year. He had some great dunks. Like, he was terrific. Like, it's not like he sucked. He was awesome.
Yeah.
You know, like, he had a couple of really good dunks, and I hope he'll play again. He'll do it again next year.
All right, that's David Aldridge of The Athletic on the Rich Eisen show yesterday, and David says keep the All-Star game. It's salvageable. There are some good things about it. It wasn't as good as it could be this year, but you know, maybe they do some tweaking to the format they had this year and come back next year, or go to what a lot of people have been talking about for a long time, U.S. versus international players, and maybe that happens. But here's a couple of thoughts that I have on the All-Star game. I go back to the days of when the NBA players were trying to pump up the league. I was working in San Antonio and Dallas in the late 70s and the early 80s, both cities with NBA teams, the Spurs, which are the only pro team in San Antonio, and the Mavericks, who are new. I got there in 1981. They had started that franchise as an expansion team in 1980. And more importantly, the league was in a position where they were trying to pump themselves up, because you may remember that the NBA Finals were played on tape delay. Yeah, you had to wait until after the evening news at 11:30 to watch the game, even though the game had already been played, like, you know, 7:30, 8 o'clock start on the East Coast. And even when I think even when they played on the West Coast, it was tape delayed too, somehow. I can't remember. Yeah, because I guess I forget whatever reason was, but it was you know, it was late. And it just wasn't realistic, because there just, you know, wasn't much interest in these games, and the networks didn't want to kill their ratings running the NBA. So the players were selling the league. And when Julius Erving would come through with the 76ers in San Antonio or Dallas, he would fill every media request. He was selling the game. Magic Johnson with the Lakers, same thing. They understood their responsibility to make the game better. Well, now they're all rich and happy, and they don't feel any responsibility for their fans. They don't even feel a responsibility to play in regular season games. So I don't know how you recapture that, but the All-Star game was part of that, and you played for the pride in your conference. Now they're talking about, make it like it was in baseball, that the winning conference gets home court advantage in the finals. That didn't work in baseball. It's not going to work in basketball either. And, you know, nowadays that you don't even care where you're seated in the NBA playoffs. Just get in, and then you start to take it seriously. So I don't know how you get it back. Also, the slam dunk contest, people forget this. Slam dunk contest debuted in the ABA. I think it was the last year of the ABA, which would have been 75, 76. And they tried this for the first time, and they did it at halftime of the game. It wasn't a separate night. We didn't have the skills competition where people are throwing basketballs through hula hoops. And, you know, the three-point shooting contest, okay, that's gotten some interest, but you know, that gets tedious after a while as well. Though that first competition for the slam dunk was at halftime of the game. If you did that, what if you did that? What if you had that as part of it? Now, you'd have to figure out something else for Saturday night. But let's just say, you compressed all this other stuff, like the Rising Stars, which is Friday, move that to Saturday along with the three-point shooting and do that at halftime, But you've spread it out so much with the 3 nights, and the fact that the players clearly don't care at all. Even with this new format, you still had players jacking up shots from half court and no real interest in defense. So make it so that it's something more of an event, and say to the players, you can kill the golden goose. Feel some responsibility for the game. Feel some responsibility for the product that you put out. How about this? And maybe this doesn't work either, but have some pride in what you do. Whatever you do for a living, you got to have some pride in workmanship. You don't just have a job just so you can collect a paycheck. In most cases, you've pursued something that has interested you, something that you feel like is fulfills you in some way, and you want to do a half-assed job when you come to work, because that's what the NBA players are doing. They're saying, hey, we don't give a crap about this, so we're just going to go out and have some fun and throw a few alley-oops and, whatever. And if that's going to be your attitude, then the hell with it. Because you're denigrating the product even more. You're saying to the fan base, yeah, I know we're making, some cases, some of our guys are making $50, $60 billion a year, and this little all-star thing, yeah. They're talking about raising the prize money for the teams. Oh, so what? You really got to do that? You really have to do that? Most successful employees that I know, and I've been an employee my whole life. I am not, I've never really run a business. I have a business now that I keep a hand in, but my career has been as an employee. And I have always tried to treat where I work like I own it. I have some pride in it, and these NBA guys, they're telling you, yeah, this sucks. We're out here. We're supposed to be out here. This is supposed to be a celebration of the game. But we don't care. Well, if you can't convince them to care, then just dump it. But, we'll see what happens with this next attempt, whether we'll see what's happened in hockey with this great interest now in this 4-nation face-off that concludes tomorrow night. Will it reach that in the NBA with the international players playing the American players? We'll see. We'll see where that goes. But the NBA All-Star Game, which was not that long ago, a decent game. I keep talking about the game in 2001 here, which was a terrific game. And Allen Iverson was the MVP. It was a great comeback by the East, and people treated it like a basketball game. The final score was somewhere like 120 to 115 or something like that, a reasonable score. And what we have now is just I don't give a damn, and that's not going to work. Hey, I want to tell you something about a place that I have been visiting for like 40 years now. It's called the Celebrity Deli. It's in Fairfax. I used to live close to Falls Church. I used to live close to the deli there, and who knows delis like I do. I lived 5 years in New York. I went to the Carnegie Deli many times. There was the Rascal House in Miami, which I go to. I know how to say rugelach, not rugeluk. I know potato latkes. I know Jewish food. I know good Jewish food when I taste it, and I taste it from time to time at the Celebrity Deli, the New York-style Jewish deli, and it's deli, not D-E-L-I, it's D-E-L-L-Y, the Celebrity Deli in Falls Church. You want a great pastrami sandwich there. You can get a salad if you want. They got great salads, too. That's the Celebrity Deli in Falls Church. You can order online at celebritydeli.com. That's celebritydeli.com.
The Andy Pollin Show on ESPN 630, the sports capital.
So I'm guessing you'd have to probably be 60 or over to remember seeing Denny McLain pitch for the Washington Senators in 1971. McLain came here in one of the worst trades ever made. This is Bob Short, the owner of the team, who a year later would rip out our hearts and move those expansion Senators from Washington to Texas, and it would be 33 years before baseball would return here with the Nationals in 2005. And I remember that season very well, that 71 season. 69 had been a great year under Ted Williams. They had finished 10 games over 500, which was really good for them. Frank Howard had a great year. Ed Brinkman, who never hit. They won games. They were fun to watch. 70, they fell back a little bit. And so at the end of the 1970 season, Bob Short traded Ed Brinkman, who was an outstanding fielding shortstop, an excellent third baseman in Aurelio Rodriguez, and a pitcher named Joe Coleman, who would win 20 games twice for the Detroit Tigers, along with a couple of other valuable assets. He traded the left side of the infield and a great starting pitcher for a washed-up Denny McLain, because Denny McLain was a name. He was a drawing card, Short thought. He had 2 spectacular years for the Detroit Tigers, winning the Cy Young both times. 1968, he won 31-6 with a 1.96 ERA, and followed that up in 1969 with a 24-9 season after they lowered the mound, and his ERA was 2.80. Then came the 1970 season, even before the 1970 season, as Sports Illustrated was coming out with a story about what was happening to Denny McLain beyond the baseball field. Now, this is the 2-time defending Cy Young Award winner from the American League. And it was on this day in 1970, 55 years ago today, that Walter Cronkite reported this on the CBS Evening News.
The magazine Sports Illustrated will report in this week's issue that Denny McLain, star pitcher of the Detroit Tigers, in 1967 was a partner in a sports bookmaking operation that had mafia connections. Sports Illustrated says McLain was put under pressure to help make good a $46,000 horse race bet the book lost late in the 1967 baseball season. The magazine notes that McLain pitched poorly shortly after that, then suffered a mysterious toe injury, and when he returned to action, was hit hard in the key game as the Red Sox beat out the Tigers for the pennant. McLain could not be reached for comment about the Sports Illustrated story. Both the Justice Department and Baseball Commissioner Bowie Kuhn had no comment.
All right, I don't know where that buzzing comes from, but you get the gist of it, that Denny McLain is involved in nefarious stuff. A couple days later, the Commissioner of Baseball, Bowie Kuhn, puts out a statement. I have decided on the basis of facts developed at these conferences, and he had long meetings with McLain and his lawyer at the baseball offices in New York. He says, I've decided that Mr. McLain's involvement in the 1967 bookmaking activities and his associations at the time leave me no alternative but to suspend him from all organized baseball activities pending the completion of my review of the situation. It should be made clear that the action taken today is based substantially on certain admissions made candidly to me by Mr. McLain and not on allegations contained in a recent magazine article, many of which I believe will prove to be unfounded. I cannot at this time indicate what that review might mean. In the meantime, this office will continue to cooperate with the enforcement authorities in Detroit, and I'm assured that Mr. McLain will do likewise. Now, the story that he was talking about came in a Sports Illustrated story, which at that time was on the newsstands, and it was on the cover, Downfall of a Hero. It alleged that McLain was in a bookmaking operation in 1967, that he and his partners did not pay off a debt of nearly $46,000, and that McLain's foot was stomped on by a hoodlum, causing him to miss several weeks of the pennant race. And the man who was owed a large sum of money eventually died in a mysterious automobile accident. Now, that 1967 season was when the Tigers just came up short. They didn't quite make it to the World Series that year. There were no divisions, so it was only the pennant winner, and they came up short. And in that period of time, McLain, who had some kind of a mysterious foot injury, did not win a game from September 2nd, 1967 through the end of the season, and the injury was finally reported on September 18th. He gave a version that he was watching TV and his leg fell asleep, and when he stood up, he stumbled and stubbed his toe. Some of the players said, no, he kicked a water cooler in anger, and some blamed it on his inability to pitch. Sports Illustrated said that no, McLain did not stub his toe. Rather, it was stubbed for him by an alleged mafioso named Tony Giancolone, who had become involved in McLain's bookmaking operations. They said that his brother, Giancolone's brother, Billy, made big bets on both the Red Sox and the Twins to win the pennant, and later bet heavily against the Tigers in McLain's final start. Now, that's not quite betting on baseball, but that's awfully close to it. And it's getting involved in mob figures who allegedly prevented McLain from pitching at his best because they stomped on his foot. McLain had been described as a fish by friends because he lost most of his bets, allegedly contributed some of the capital to the bookmaking venture, but when the bettor had hit a horse that was a long shot and came in at $46,000, they didn't have the money to pay off the bets. So all of this was going on at this time, and finally the chicken came home to roost. And, okay, they, nowadays I don't think with everything that would be investigated that McLain could come back and pitch that season. Yet he did, but he was suspended 2 more times that season, once for dumping water on a sports writer and the other time for carrying a gun on a team flight. So he wound up with a record of 3-5. His ERA not terrible, 3.75, though today that might be a good ERA. But that was his record after 2 seasons where he had won 55 games. 55 games over the previous year. He won only 3 in 1970. Yet Bob Short made that deal for him before the 1971 season, and McLain went 10-22. It's tough to lose 22 games, but he lost 22 games in 1971, and the team moved to Texas, though he didn't go with them. I think he was traded to the A's and then finished up his career with the Braves and never pitched again. But he was always looking for money. He was a guy who lived fast. He was making close to $100,000, which is a lot of money in those days. He owned his own plane, and what he would do is he would fly around the country to make appearances. He played the organ, so that was part of his act, and he would fly to another city on the same day to pitch that night. And they said he sometimes looked tired from doing that. He was not exactly suspended for gambling. He was suspended for racketeering, and it was the first time that had happened since 2 New York Giants players were suspended in 1924. And, of course, we had the Black Sox scandal in 1919, but this is over a half century later. Other things about McLain at the time, the 1969 All-Star Game was played here, and obviously having won the Cy Young the year before and having a great season in 69 where he won 24 games, he was due to be the starting pitcher in the All-Star Game here, which was due to be played on a Tuesday night in July in 1969, and that's the last time that we had a game rained out. We had torrential rains. The dugouts were flooded. They couldn't play, so they postponed the game until 1 o'clock the following afternoon. They never do that now. If they had to postpone it, which they haven't had to do, you'd play it Wednesday night. Now, maybe they even keep going till like midnight if they had to play the game. But in those days, they did postpone it till 1 o'clock. Well, here was the problem. After the game was called on Tuesday night, Denny McLain, who had flown to National Airport on his own private plane so he could skedaddle out of there after he finished pitching, flew home to Detroit to have teeth capped the following morning. And he thought that he could have his teeth capped in a morning dental appointment, hop on his own plane, fly it to National Airport, and make it to RFK in time to pitch a 1 o'clock game. Well, he got the teeth capped. He got in his plane in time, but because of flight patterns and delays, he made it to the ballpark late. Mel Stottlemyre started, and by the time he got to the game, they were way behind, and they eventually lost the game. But that's the kind of life that he was living. He was, he got carried away with his fame and thought he could make a lot of money doing different things, and plus he's involved in gambling when he is, as they say, a fish. All he did was lose money. And just the story of Denny McLain is just fascinating. And when I look back at this story from 55 years ago, it makes you wonder why baseball treated Pete Rose the way they did. Not that he didn't deserve it, but that Denny McLain got away with basically a slap on the wrist for involving himself in racketeering and gambling, which came dangerously close to baseball. No evidence that he himself bet on baseball, but the fact that he was involved with people who did, Who knows how far Bowie Kuhn took his investigation, and who knows what he swept under the carpet. But all of that led to, and it would have been great, I guess, for the fortunes of the Washington Senators, especially for a 13-year-old kid like me, if McLain would have been booted out of baseball for good, and then Bob Short doesn't make the trade to send Ed Brinkman and Aurelio Rodriguez and Joe Coleman to Detroit for a washed-up Denny McLain. But, as they say, as Steve Spurrier once said, hindsight is 50-50, and there's that. One other quick thing, those guys who were doing those burglaries of players while they were on the road, apparently they have caught them. It was a group based in Chile, and they caught the guys with nearly $1.5 million of property stolen from athletes at various times. They have now caught them, and that is going to be hopefully adjudicated, and hopefully we won't have more of those. I mean, you think of these players who go on the road, and everybody knows when they're on the road, and that's when their homes are targeted, and that's where all these thefts took place. So hopefully that's in the rearview mirror, and so is this show. Bram is coming up next, and I will see you back here tomorrow morning at 9 a.m.